So as promised in my previous video, I want to talk about Russia ending the Black Sea grain deal with Ukraine, as well as their recent declaration pertaining to commercial vessels sailing to Ukrainian ports. What you are looking at is a map that shows the line where Russia would start taking action against vessels because they are assumed to be heading to Ukrainian ports. So why is all this transpiring? Well, 2 days ago, Russia pulled out of the grain agreement, and today they released a declaration that says all vessels sailing in the waters of the Black Sea to Ukrainian ports will be regarded as potential carriers of military cargo. Accordingly, the countries of such vessels will be considered to be involved in the Ukrainian conflict on the side of the Kyiv regime. Now, under international law, Russia is allowed to do this. Whether Russia says it's at war or not, the international community considers this region under the laws of warfare and international maritime law. Therefore, Russia is allowed to board and search ships suspected of transporting arms, which means, because it's Russia, they will likely suspect all vessels are transporting arms just to board and search them. And then if they feel like stealing the cargo, they can just lie about whether the ship is actually carrying arms on them or not, because frankly, who's going to stop them? Additionally, the law allows for Ukrainian flagged ships to be captured as war prizes by Russia. Now, what the declaration doesn't say, nor does international law allow for, is Russia to start sinking commercial vessels. This merely means they can board and inspect ships. If it's a Ukrainian ship, they can seize the goods. If they find weapons on a ship, they can seize the goods there too. If Russia begins sinking other countries' flagged vessels under this declaration, it would be a violation of international law and would likely start a conflict with the countries those vessels are flagged under, which would definitely not be in the best interest of Russia, as the majority of the ships heading into this region are Chinese, as well as some other African and Middle Eastern countries as well. Additionally, the declaration said Russia is withdrawing safety guarantees for traveling through the Black Sea, which traditionally meant running into mines and things of that nature, but it could also be pretext for Russia to sink a vessel. However, again, I don't think Russia is going to be sinking commercial vessels, or if they do, that'd be incredibly stupid, which it is Russia, and we've seen incredibly stupid things in the past. So why did Russia back out of the deal? Well, because Russia says that they didn't receive the concessions that were given to them as part of the deal, which included allowing Russian banks back into the international SWIFT system, completing an ammonia pipeline, allowing Russian ships to dock in international ports. None of these things were ever going to happen because Europe and the United States were never going to acquiesce to those deals, and if Erdogan and the UN, who brokered this deal, said that, they were talking out of their asses. So what is the impact of this deal ending? Well, roughly 10% of the world's grain is produced in Ukraine, and the country serves as the breadbasket for much of the Middle East and North Africa. Russia's withdrawal from the deal will now ignite major fears about global food security in the developing world, as Ukrainian grain feeds about 349 million people in 79 countries. And this is according to the International Rescue Committee. So when the deal went south, it caused prices to rise, especially those in developing nations. Corn, soybean prices jumped 3%, but they're still significantly lower than they were last year, the highs of last year, that is. Now, I also want to caveat that this deal dying doesn't necessarily mean that those nations requiring Ukrainian wheat won't get it. From a shipping standpoint, the ball is in Russia's court for deciding whether the wheat gets to depart Ukraine, or more than likely, whether it will depart Ukraine under a Russian flag and Russia will steal the revenues from it. It essentially comes down to how far Russia is willing to weaponize food that is headed to the Middle East and North Africa. So to avoid Russia taking Ukrainian grain via the ocean, Ukraine will now likely be forced to export most of its grain and oilseeds through land borders and its Danube River ports, which will significantly drive up transport costs and hurt Ukrainian farmers and those wanting to buy the food. Now, the biggest impact, again, will be felt by Africa, followed by portions of Asia, then Europe. When it comes to Europe and Asia, they likely won't starve, they'll just see a rise in prices. The Western Hemisphere is largely food secure, but may see some small price increases as well as they face competing buyers across the globe. As for the U.S. and those really in the U.S. agricultural sphere, such as wealthier portions of Asia and portions of Europe not serviced by France and Germany, they will be the least affected. This is because the U.S. is the largest grower of wheat, it's the largest grower of corn, and the second largest grower of soybeans, and is the largest agricultural exporter in the world, and even more so when buttressed by our fellow agricultural powerhouse, which is our Canadian neighbors to the north. Now, the question has come up, could the West provide an escort to the Ukrainian grain? across the Black Sea. Well, the only countries that are really in a position to do this are Turkey, Bulgaria, and Romania. And this is because Turkey has closed the Bosphorus Straits. I've seen comments across multiple videos saying, send a carrier battle group. Turkey has closed the strait, and they are allowed to do that by treaty. So the U.S. Navy is not going to be sailing into the Black Sea anytime soon unless Turkey raises that moratorium. Turkey has rejected the idea of them providing security for the grain in order to avoid engagement with Russia, despite Turkey's Black Sea presence being far stronger than Russia's. And Romania and Bulgaria have largely followed the same route. Now, there's a question of insurance as well, because you need insurance to ship goods across the sea. Otherwise, you won't be allowed to port anywhere, and it is likely that no ships will head into Ukraine anyways because of the steep insurance costs. And if they are approved at all, it's because many of the larger maritime insurers have backed out, but there might be some smaller insurers that are willing to provide insurance. Regardless, the insurance will be extraordinarily expensive. And this is where the cost will come in for China. China, who used to be on the international market for insurance, now guarantees the insurance of their own vessels. But if they are shipping across multiple ports, because they're entering the Black Sea, that is going to increase the costs for them. Now, because they have deals with Russia, and likely the likelihood of them needing external insurance is going to be slim, but the insurance cost plus the increase in grain is going to disproportionately impact China as well. And there's no word on what China's reaction is, so we'll have to wait and see what takes place there. Now, I've always believed Russia would have eventually left the Ukrainian wheat deal because it allows them to exert leverage on low-income countries in Africa, the Middle East, etc., because they will become more dependent on Russian wheat rather than Ukrainian wheat. Nonetheless, the ruble dropped to new lows in the last few days against the dollar because this deal has caused a rift in the stability across the globe. And when that happens, money tends to flood towards the United States as a stable repository for various different, whether it's money or other goods. So while this does hurt Ukraine, and it will hurt many nations in the developing world and could elevate prices across the globe from a large scale to a small scale, depending on where you live, it seems that Russia's decisions are once again reinforcing America's power across the world. Because when Russia does things like this, people flock with their money to the United States. People look to the United States for their guidance. And people look to the United States for potentially trying to counter the losses on the global market with regard to food, and seeing if the United States can bolster food production. Now, granted, food takes time, but can bolster over time the ability to supplement the world and its food needs with Ukrainian wheat potentially coming off the table. Again, though, I don't think it's entirely going to be coming off the table. There are other means to ship it. It's just going to be more expensive, or frankly, Russia could just steal it and ship it themselves. Unfortunately for everyone that is against Russia in this situation.